So, good morning. I look at your faces. It's still morning. It must have been a crazy party yesterday. So let's go into the party mode and also talk not just the power of the capital, but actually the power of pirates. It's the power of the coffee and the power of capital. My name is Kaidi, Ruusalepp, as introduced, and I'm the founder and CEO of Funderbeam. And Funderbeam is a private marketplace for private companies. So private companies can raise funds through us, and when investors invest, we make the investments tradable. We utilize the blockchain technology, but later I can talk about why we use the blockchain technology and how do we do it. So basically, it is like a private stock market. But it all goes back to the pirates and to the 17th century. So 17th century was a super active century in trading between the Europe and Asia and the East. So all the coast towns, big towns, had ports. Ships were going out to Asia, coming back with the goods. And to fund the ship and to fund the voyage, investors funded the ship. But in a way, to Asia, the pirates hacked the ships. So to mitigate the risks, investors started to invest not just in one ship, but started to invest in several ships. And the first company ever formed was East Indian Company to fight against the risks caused by the pirates. So instead of putting all eggs into one basket or putting all your money into one ship, investors could diversify risks by investing in several ships. So even if 4 ships went out and 3 of those never came back, investors still could earn return on the investments and could have a quite nice of a fortune. So pirates were essential, and they played a crucial role in forming what we know today as a private or the public limited companies. When investors invested to the East Indian Company and the other companies, then the first securities what were issued were paper-based securities. And most of the trades were done in the coffee shops. So all the rich people were sitting in the coffee shops, having a nice cup of coffee and trading with each other. So the first stock markets ever were coffee shops, back then in 17th century. You had a nice cup of coffee, you were shouting to each other because coffee shops were super noisy, and that's how the noisy trading floors were formed. Only 19th century, very early 19th century, the London Stock Exchange was established. So basically 2 centuries, the stock markets were coffee shops. But if you think about of those investing and trading, what you need an asset to invest in, and then you need somebody to whom to sell your investments. And the stock markets back then were quite crazy and quite active because some of the investors made fortune even before the ship even left the port. So when the London Stock Exchange was formed, then the first 2 decades, the regulators didn't allow the trading because then the stock markets saw the first boom. And then 1815, New York Stock Exchange was formed, already with the first trading. So coffee and coffee shops remind me very much of the way co-working spaces work today, and the cafes around the corner of San Francisco, where investors invest in startups and where they share the deals and where they share the information. So we sort of have gone back to the coffee and to the coffee shops. Now, how to invest in crazy ideas, and the first elements of crowdfunding were introduced in mid-19th century, where the French philosopher Auguste Comte wanted to be the first independent philosopher so that he could really think and introduce the ideas he believed in. So he crowdfunded his piece of positivism. And he issued the notes for those who crowdfunded him, and he introduced the crowdfunding opportunity during the local, or through the local newspaper. So again, we can't call them investors, but it was the first crowdfunding case. And it is the independence of the fundraiser that they could still have the freedom to do what he or she wants to do with the power of the funds of so many people. Technology, and with the development of the technology, the power of the capital means that you could engage already masses. I don't know how many of you have seen the recent and really wonderful movie of Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody. But part of it, and actually the very center of the movie, was Live Aid, or Live Aid. And Live Aid was the concert organized by Bob Geldof to raise funds to help the starving children in Africa. So it's the whole day concert, and they were aiming to raise at least 10 million. But it ended up raising 40 to 50 million, which was absolutely outstanding in early 90s. Outstanding, 40 to 50. And actually, when you read the information about it, what came out is that their latest numbers are 150 million. So the Live Aid, actually, and the impact of it, raised 150 million. Now, going to the very recent developments, the battle between IPO and ICO, and the real power and the shift of the power of the capital. IPO is the way the stock markets operate nowadays. You still raise the funds as a company for multiple people to fund your growth. Or at least this used to be the essence of the stock market, to help companies grow and to achieve their goals. But what happens during the last 2 decades is the growth of the private capital and the growth of the alternative funding resources, one of it being the ICO. Google, before they went public, raised $6.8 million. $6.8 million. And then they went public to raise capital for funding the growth. Now, if you think about the latest big startup companies going public, majority of them have raised billion or billions before going public, like Facebook and Alibaba, 11 billion before going public. So it's not about anymore raising funds to fund your growth, but it's more about getting exit. So early investors stay longer and longer private, and instead of taking out your capital and doing what the capital is meant to do, which is about fund the young companies and fund the crazy ideas, you sit there and you are locked. And the way the markets developed is not just the case of the stock market operators or any intermediaries in between. It's also very much to do with the regulation and the way it happened to be that private capital is so much cheaper and so much more accessible than the public capital. But the ICOs are a new and an interesting trend, and just yesterday a new report was released that not just ICOs, but the security tokens are aimed to be the next $1 trillion market where the new initiatives jump in. And if you think about the ICO and IPO, then actually the essence of it and the idea of it is exactly the same. To enable investors, a lot of investors invest in your product or in your idea, or now with the ICO also into the protocol level. But you as an investor get the liquidity, which means that you can sell your investment anytime you want to. But the main difference is the layer of the intermediates in those two systems providing the service and the regulation. Looking into the numbers of private capital versus public capital. Funderbeam also runs a startup data. We get the data from different sources, and we produce quarterly funding reports. And these pictures here, having the circles of North America, Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world, throughout all those years we've analyzed this information, has given quite interesting understanding of what is happening in the markets. So the first half of this year, if you look at the North America and compare it with Asia, then obviously North America is growing. But what is happening in Asia and what is actually happening in the rest of the world, this is where the boom is coming. And this is where the new initiatives come. And this is, again, when you think about the private capital and Asian private capital coming to the markets, where the power is. And now when we compare the IPOs with the private capital and investing into the startups, then 2017, North America, the IPO market was half the size of the private capital, whereas in Asia, it was actually vice versa. Companies were still raising public capital and not so much having, or raising public capital, yes, and not so much having the private capital. But 2018, it's completely changed. There's the power also, the private capital in Asia. It's in ICOs, it's in VCs. You know that the SoftBank introduced $100 billion fund. $100 billion fund. One private fund is bigger than the whole yearly IPO markets. And it's still booming and growing. So the shift from the private and the public and the power of the capitals last 10 years have completely changed. But when you think about us, what about us then? Do we have access to investment into the early stage companies? Can we invest in the future unicorns and at one point get out of those future or the unicorns so that we could fund the next unicorns? That's the interesting question, and this is the pain point for the startup investments overall. What if I invest? Do I get out? The blockchain, the previous speaker was talking about the trust, and this is very much what the blockchain is actually bringing here in this industry, and why the ICOs are booming so much is that actually instead of all those intermediaries who do something on the main markets, there's only one thing which is called the technology, saying that my assets belong to me, and when the transaction is done, saying that my assets now belong to somebody else. But the other thing, what blockchain introduced us, is giving power to the entrepreneurs. And giving power to the entrepreneurs to design your own funding. What is it you want to fund, and what is it where you want to raise the funds? So when you think about the value or the assets around the blockchain and what is built on the blockchain, and starting from the right-hand side, obviously everybody knows there's a currency. And the Bitcoin blockchain is mainly used by the Bitcoin currency. But Ether, Litecoin, all of those currencies, they can operate across the borders because there's the trust element and there's the currency built on top of it. And the second layer is the utility layer. And one of the most interesting cases, at least for me, was the Filecoin, where you could invest on the protocol layer, and you could also invest into the sharing the resources layer, which has not existed before. You as an entrepreneur can raise the funds developing your technology, and investors get piece of the technology. One on the right here, rights-backed, these are the ICOs which are sort of give investors the rights for either the future profit, for belonging to the community. The stronger the community is, the more the token or the coin is valued. So you can play around building the value, not based on the equity level, but based on something else. And the last one, which is Funderbeam is doing, it's the security tokens. So in Funderbeam case, when companies raise the funds, then investors get a piece of the company. So we tokenize the equity. And all of this enables, as I said, to get the power of the capital back to the entrepreneurs and think and tailor your fundraising around what do I actually want to fund and what do I want to achieve with this funding. And using the blockchain underneath and issuing the coins, you might also be able to give investors the desired liquidity. Going now to the stock market participants, what happened over those decades from coffee shops to the stock markets, how they are today, is that there's quite many intermediaries doing their own job. But the job, when we think about, it is the job of the trust. Saying my money belongs to me, saying my assets belong to me, and my assets have now transferred to somebody else, saying that this is the final cap table, and all these kind of things. But when we think about the blockchain age and going back to the basics and going back to the coffee shops, then all you need is a place where the securities can exchange with the funds. That's all you need. And the most innovative stock markets, think about it. Zagreb Stock Exchange, to start with, because we are in Zagreb, and having the Funderbeam SE formed here in collaboration with Zagreb Stock Exchange, you have to think for the future and actually to understand not just what the stock exchanges were aimed for, but what is it the new technologies bring and how they challenge the existing stock markets. NASDAQ is playing and flirting with the blockchain. Singapore Stock Exchange is flirting with the blockchain. Everybody does flirt with the blockchain. But if you are in the industry, can you actually do it? And can you say to your market participants, sorry, we don't need you anymore. We have a technology. So in many meanings, for the companies like Funderbeam, it's easy to start from the plain sheet and build something on top of it with the partnership of the big players in the market. Another crazy thing and another power of the capital is decentralized autonomous organizations. I don't know how many of you have read the story of DAO. I mean the first initial DAO. It's the concept of the fund built in the blockchain so that the technology and the smart contract controls how to invest and where to invest. The organization doesn't have legal structures. The organization doesn't have the articles of association. The organization doesn't have a fund management license. It is a principle agreed between the group of people and the principles written in the code, and the code controlling the way the investments are carried. And all those new ways and new organizations where you don't need the local regulation, where you don't need to register yourself in Zagreb, you don't need to go to the public notaries, but you build up a concept, you write it in the code, and then the code starts to control it. And when the code starts to control it, and you can invest into the piece of code, then it brings us again to the next and the new layer of maybe the future, the way we are going to be, and the way the power of the capital is built. So right now we talk about the private capital and the public capital, but maybe in the future we talk about the capital controlled by the code, controlled by the algorithms. And I urge you to keep an eye on all the developments and all the crazy ideas built on the blockchain, and think about them with an open eyes. Back to the coffee shops. This is what you can see on Funderbeam. We don't have any brokers in between you and stock markets. We don't have anybody in the back office. If company wants to raise the funds, we help the company to raise the funds. If investors invest, they invest directly, and once the investment is formalized, you can start trading with it. And Funderbeam is raising right now funds on our own platform. And what amazes me is we built it around the community. Everybody who invests, we do the KYC, AML, can decide whether they want to disclose their name and the picture in the list of the company's investors. More than 85% of investors want to be public. They want their face and the name be visible as an investors and to be part of the community. And last 2 days, I've spent time on sending out emails to investors who wanted to invest in Funderbeam, and we asked them, if you invest, how can you contribute to help us as a company? Because the power of the network is something you cannot underestimate as a company. And I've sent out an email like, hey, I'm very grateful that you would like to spread the word about the Funderbeam in Portugal. Please meet our head of Iberian markets and let's see what can we do together. There's the other guy who said, I've been building all my life apps, and I know exactly how to do an app that scores high, both in Google Play and in app. Obviously, we got in touch with them. So more than 40 investors not just invested in Funderbeam, but also said, oh, this is the way I could help. And maybe this is, again, the new way and the new power of the capital, utilizing the network, helping investors to be part of the community, giving them the liquidity and the opportunity to trade and keep them close so that you can grow with the help of the investors. When you fundraise and when you want to grow your company, then VC is not the only source. There's many other sources to get the capital. And if you're an entrepreneur, read before you jump, because the new technology and the new ways of raising capital is gradually giving the power back to the entrepreneurs. Thank you. I see we have some time for the questions, like one. One question? No. Okay, thanks. I'll be around the corner, and you've had my details, so thanks.
Appreciate that.